So we start again with more bravado from Stanley, who responds to this kind of question about, well, do you find it bracing? He says, me, no, but you will. So he's obviously trying to be assertive at this particular point in time. And he says, I like it here, but I'll be moving soon. And of course, at this moment in time is a huge moment of dramatic irony, because we know that this is completely untrue, and that he's performing throughout these following speeches this sort of effort to conform, this attempting to sort of cast his jaunt down on the coast, his sojourn down on the coast as a holiday, in the way that McCann, Goldberg talks about it with his uncle Barney, and it's this effort then to borrow the norms and the language of conformity, I think, because he's realised that's partly why McCann is here. He says, back home, I'll stay there this time too. No place like home. So there's this kind of, again, he starts to borrow the cliches that you hear from Goldberg, and in order to invoke a sense of community and of the solidity of the family and all of these values that are the staples of orthodoxy and conformity that he has obviously detected are, the concerns that McCann is here to express. And then again, he now only borrows these cliches of orthodoxy and conformity, but they're now not even at all possibly true and plausible for him. I wouldn't have left, but business called. There's this kind of complete uncertainty in the way he uses those languages, the way he uses tenses even there. Business calls now, as if it's happening in the present and then in the past as well. So this again, a huge moment of dramatic irony where we are completely aware of the fact that this has not happened and this is absolutely inauthentic for his character. And it's an effort to kind of strike up a sense of rapport with McCann on the basis of their shared orthodoxy. McCann, I think, detects this and says, you in business, he detects that there's an element of inauthenticity about Stanley's performance of orthodoxy. He says, no, I think I'll give it up. And I think, there's a huge sense of personal uncertainty in that line, because in one moment he seems to be talking about how it's his calling back home, and then in the next moment he's immediately explaining it as this sort of almost like casual pastime. A bit further down, he says, I used to live very quietly, played records, that's about all, and he's very deliberately trying to keep, I think trying to combine his own authentic fear of communal interaction that you see in the play, and combine it with a sense of more, orthodox behaviour. I used to, keep myself to myself, everything delivered to the door. Then I started a little private business, so the way that he actually got out of his isolation in this lie is by becoming an entrepreneur. We couldn't think of anything more sort of orthodox and conventional. And then he lies further down that this is what brings him here. Business is what brings him here. It's precisely the reverse of business that brings him here. It's his desire to keep away from conventional and orthodox society. You never get used to living in someone else's house, and of course this complete falsity belies, runs against the opening portrait that we've been given of him in Act 1 of not only being comfortable but being too comfortable in someone else's house. A huge moment of dramatic irony there. Again, shows up this performance of orthodoxy for its inauthenticity. And then at the end, he's desperately seeking a kind of confirmation from McCann. You can see from all the questions, don't you agree? I live so quietly, you can appreciate what you have, and things change. That's what they say, isn't it? That again, this line here, he's looking for approval from an orthodoxy, from a figure of orthodoxy. He himself is uncertain, then offers McCann a cigarette. And so there's this bizarre version here. It's almost like a bad impression of Goldberg, this attempt to seem composed and commanding through the use of inauthentic language and through the performance of orthodoxy. And the offer of a cigarette is a way of establishing rapport. And again, that action is probably out of that entire speech the only moment of authenticity that reveals the kind of power play between the two of them. He offers him a cigarette as a way of trying to shorten the distance between them and to deflate the tension that's accumulating between them. McCann simply says, I don't smoke. And there's a sense of solidity and a retention of power, of the refusal to accept the gift. The gift of the cigarette is a claim over McCann. Stanley, another example of where pleasantries are used for sinister, domineering intentions, and McCann understands this and refuses the gift itself. And so that solidity, I think, contrasts with the uncertainty that you see in Stanley's lines above. And then I think his performance crumbles even further down the page, because Stanley lights a cigarette, and there's again voices from the back, that sense of community and sociality that is so unsettling and unnerving for Stanley. And it's, McCann says that it's Goldberg, who he has yet to name, and also the man of the house, who he also doesn't name. He says that, I bet you wouldn't think I'd led such a quiet life, and there's this kind of defensiveness here that he's deliberately trying to perform a sense of reasonable conventionality in his lines that you can see just through the ellipses, which are, again, the sort of shortest of Pinter's signature pauses, that his ability to perform this act is breaking down. He's been drinking a bit down here. But what I mean is, you know how it is. Away from your own, all wrong, of course. And all of those thoughts are completely incomplete. and that itself, you use its oxymoronic language to explain it. All of them are incomplete. And attempt to invoke the importance of being around family and having community, away from your own, I'll be right when I get back. But what I mean is the way some people look at me, you think I was a different person. He's exposing his defensiveness here, and the fact that he knows McCann is detecting the sham in his earlier performance. I suppose I've changed, but I'm still the same man that I always was. And again, this is a sort of almost signature line for the play itself. I suppose I'm the same. I suppose I've changed. He can't be certain about that change because he has no real idea from where he began. And but I suppose I'm still the same man that I always was. Again, at that moment in time, the sense of certainty in that promise is being shown at that moment in time in the play to be a complete lie. The identity is nothing more than a series of interactions that are inauthentic, that mask the truth of the power play between two individuals, and that your identity consists simply in the extent to which you are either the dominator or the dominated, the dominator or the subordinated. Further down, it says, he wouldn't think to look at me really, not really that I was the sort of bloke to cause any trouble, would you? But all the hedging language that he uses here shows a sense of fear and a sense of uncertainty. Do you know what I mean? And then McCann just says, no, as Stanley picks up a strip of paper, and again, mind that. So his real identity is completely lost in this hedging language that is stumbling around for a sort of definition of self, and all it becomes in the end is just an affirmation of his sort of law-abiding behaviour. And I think this performative uncertainty that we see in these lines is so similar to Blanche's, so similar to Blanche's illusions about the type of social orthodoxy that she represents. Stanley's self-performance here in front of McCann's threat is exactly like hers. However, the domination, the politesse of this power play between the two is quickly unravelled here, and you can see this through the stage direction that Pinter uses quickly. Why are you down here? It immediately exposes Stanley's real grasp of the situation, and his previous lines as a complete farce. He knows that what's just followed, what we've just seen in that previous page is a complete farce, and as a farce that's almost exposing it's deliberately shrouding the hostile intentions and the conflict between the two characters. And again, a short holiday. This is a ridiculous house to pick on, and he rises, and again, he's attempting to assert himself through this staged direction. And the phrase itself, I think, reveals his understanding. You think of it, it's a ridiculous house to pick, but he uses this phrase that itself has this connotation of aggressive domination and bullying. Why? Because it's not a boarding house. It never was. So here, this is language of self-defense, but it's misapplied paranoia. It's about himself that he's talking here, really. And that, of course, his ability to defend himself and the boarding house is simply to deny the authenticity of the way it's identified. And so that's, again, one of his weaknesses, is that his defense mechanisms are to deny the authenticity of self, or to be unaware of it or alienated from an understanding of it. McCann says, so you're a bit depressed for a man on his birthday, and this is again a sort of amazing number of different ironic layers to this, because McCann is the one that is constantly being accused of being morbid by Goldberg, but he's the one that becomes the critic of the sort of gaiety and pleasure, and the origins are still kind of evaded here, but the sense of gentility is sort of reinstated in this particular line. And then Stanley again understands this. Why do you call me sir? You don't like it? Listen, don't call me sir. He doesn't respond in the sharp way in which the line is delivered. And Stanley, to the table, speaks, listen, don't call me sir. He's not able to look at McCann in the eyes, but is able to look at the table itself. And again, we show this revisiting of the resisting of false civility from Stanley, because he sees the threat that's inherent in that official language and the way in which it masks sinister intent. I wonder if you don't like it. Again, McCann agrees to this. It's absolutely he knows that language is ultimately meaningless and it's purely a way of hiding his real intentions. Stanley moves away. No, anyway, this isn't my birthday. So after his kind of falsity, we can't tell if this is true. So we are dislocated from any real sense of whether this birthday itself is an actual, authentic moment. He says, no, not until next month. Not according to radio. She's terrible, crazy around the bend. That's a terrible thing to say. So again, there's something here that I think is suggestive of possibly the type of guilt that Stanley has experienced, this sense of possibly being hostile towards women. There's a number of different implications to that, least of which is the moment of the sort of not actual but sort of figurative, incipient rape of Lulu in the interrogation scene. Stanley to the table again says, have you found that out yet? There's a lot you don't know. Haven't you found that out yet? There's a lot you don't know. I think someone's leading you up the garden path. But again, his effort to shift the power in this interaction is purely based on an effort to just mislead someone. So there's no actual confrontation of ideas, but purely another way to mislead someone by using a cliche. I'm going to evade dealing with what you're saying by sending you in a different direction, and doing so in evasive language that is fundamentally meaningless. And with this conversational idiom, who would do that, leaning across the table? That woman is mad. Again, the fact that he fails to respond proves that the lies that he's telling McCann are completely inaccurate. And McCann says that slander. Again, he's used this language of power. Slander is something that people in positions of authority are the ones that conventionally use and repeatedly use. And you don't know what you're doing. Your cigarette is near that paper. So this juxtaposition of two completely different things. Stanley's hostile criticism of McCann, and then McCann's obsessive focus on the paper, I think, shows his defensive aggression with McCann. You don't know what you're doing. And McCann completely ignores this assertion and just reminds him of the paper. So this, aggressive language is again exposed as being this almost hollow threat, because all that matters is the nature of the power that both characters seem to possess in their interaction. The voices from the back again, a reminder of sociality, of society, and of convention. And as we see Stanley becoming more destabilised, he reacts more aggressively to this reminder of convention. Where the hell are they? And he stubs his cigarette out. So why don't they come in? What are they doing out there? You want to steady yourself. All of these different questions are all betraying that sense of disturbance and internal conflict. His voices from the back are almost similar to the Vesuviana that we constantly hear throughout Streetcar, that narrates the conflicted state of Blanche's internal consciousness, of Blanche's internal life. And McCann is the one that just says you want to steady yourself. So, interestingly, Stanley then, in response to this assertion of poise, tries to dominate the physical space, crosses to him and grips his arm urgently. Look, don't touch me, McCann says. Look, listen a minute, let go of my arm. Look, sit down a minute, savagely hitting his arm, don't do that. And this is the first glimpse where we really get the naked display of power. And you'll notice that it's the moment at which their dialogue becomes the most restrained. When they say the least amount to each other, it is where the purpose and the authentic nature of their communication and their interaction is exposed most directly. The physicality is more true than the language here, and that power triggers McCann's first display of aggression. Don't touch me. Look, listen a minute. He absolutely will refuse to countenance listening to Stanley in any fashion until Stanley relinquishes his attempt to physically dominate the space and to physically dominate and subordinate McCann. And then immediately we see the stage savagely, the violent intent that we can see is simmering beneath the surface of McCann is exposed purely because of the physicality of this. And again, what it shows us is that language itself is ultimately meaningless in these power plays, and that it's the reality that language shrouds that is the centre of authentic interaction and communication. Stanley backs across the stage holding his arm, showing his sense of being wounded here. And then this dialogue here, listen, you know what I was talking about before, didn't you? I don't know what you're at all. It's a mistake, you understand? You're in a bad state now. So this, I think, is a moment of dramatic irony, because I think Stanley is himself unaware of McCann's lack of awareness of what he's talking about. You know, we've seen that McCann has very little understanding of why they're here. He is just abstract power, really. And Stanley, I think, is assuming that McCann knows more about the rationale for this visit than he does. And I think, again, it gives us a sense of his guilt, that he is guiltily defending himself against an assumed accusation that the person that he's defending himself against is unaware of, that he's defending himself against someone that really doesn't understand the nature of his guilt. And that's when McCann tells you, you're in a bad state now. So, a little further down, hissing, Stanley says, I've explained to you, Danny, that all those years in Basingstoke, I never stopped outside the door. So there's, again, I think part of the problem here is that he's isolated. And that's, again, this is where his lack of self-knowledge is briefly exposed. He's not fully certain at this moment in time why they're there, and that mistakenly confesses to precisely the reason why they've taken offence to him and are trying to re-assimilate him into society. He says, you know, I'm flabbergasted with you, and he's flabbergasted because Stanley's just confessed, I think, to their central criticism of him and their central point of resentment against him. And there's a shift in demeanour here that I think shows us that there's a sort of lack of essence in Stanley's character. He's constantly shifting from hissing above up here to reasonably here. You know, this irritability obviously suggests disturbance, but also, again, a lack of authenticity in his identity. Look, you look an honest man. You're being made a fool of, that's all. You understand? Where do you come from? It's an absolutely pointless question at the end. And again, he's lying here. We know that he's lying because all of the signs previously have shown us that Stanley's detected that he is a threat himself. And then he falls into this kind of classic, feeble, stereotypical effort to diffuse tension of saying that he likes Ireland. I know Ireland very well. I have many friends there. I love that country and I admire and trust its people. I trust them. They respect the truth and they have a sense of humour. I think their policemen are wonderful. Of course, this is a sort of performance of feigned, authentic national identity, which, again, forms this kind of destabilising effect in terms of all of the characters' identities. You know, they are performative. They're very little in terms of their own weak meaning. And he says, you know, I've been there. I've never seen such sunsets. What about coming out to have a drink with me? There's a pub down the road, serves draft gin. It's very difficult to get in these paths. You know, so he's gone from seeing him as this complete hostile sense of threat to trying to be best mates with him and to invite him for a Guinness down the pub. You know, so this, I think, exposes the weakness of his strategy, the constant shifting between them. So he breaks off, and the voices draw nearer. Goldberg and Petey enter from the back door, and so this is brings about another moment of crisis as he enters. A mother in a million. He sees Stanley and says, again, he's invoking these kind of cliches of ethnic identity. You know, the grateful Jewish son to the fiercely protective Jewish mother, and Stanley, I think, engaged in obvious sense of appropriation here. You'll see this over the lines. He says, oh, hello, Stan. You haven't met Stanley, have you, Mr. Goldberg? I haven't had the pleasure. This is Mr. Goldberg. This is Mr. Weather. Pleased to meet you. We were just getting a bit of air in the garden. Of course, this all sounds terribly polite and friendly. Just telling Mr. Bowles about my old mum. So again, he's evoking traditional values, a sense of family belonging, a sense of community commitment, and and off he goes into another one of Goldberg's famous sort of performances of subjective authenticity that we have absolutely no idea of the veracity of these performances. I used to go for a walk down the canal with a girl who lived down my road, and again, it's evoking a sense of community. She's a beautiful girl. What a voice that bird had, a nightingale, my word of honour. Again, just little fragments from the experience that I think are supposed to be kind of moments of authenticity, but actually I think are sort of stereotypes from cultural production. Good, pure. She wasn't a Sunday school teacher for nothing anyway. He's again invoking this kind of false sense of virtue and morality. I never took liberties. We weren't like the young men these days, in those days. So again, there's another perhaps intimation about the nature of Stanley's potential guilt as being something to do with, I don't know, the violation of taboos around women or the violation of social orthodoxy along those particular lines. Further down, he says, I tip my hat to the toddlers, I give a helping hand to a couple of stray dogs, everything came natural. Of course, this is the part that really exposes the fabrication, that he's exposing himself as like a friendly man towards little children and give a helping hand to a couple of stray dogs. Everything came natural, and this is the line that belies the inauthenticity of the recollection. I can see it like yesterday, the sun falling behind the dog stadium. I think the fact that he invokes a sunset immediately after Stanley has quite obviously invoked a sunset in his performance of Irishness, again, gives us this sense of complete unreliability in the rendition of selfhood, the authenticity of identity. He leans back contentedly. He's absolutely happy in this little facade of nostalgia that he's constructing around himself. And of course, this is inviting comparison with Blanche and the way that she continually attempts to reconstruct and renegotiate that illusory vision of herself that originates in the past. And Goldberg and McCann start having a chat, like behind the town hall. What town hall? In Carrickmacross. Across. There's no comparison. Up the street, into my gate, inside the door. Signing, my old mum used to say. So they're kind of trying to, evasively draw connections between their own senses of origin. But again, they're kept deliberately vague. And then here we get this destabilizing effect from the choice of name. Sign me. Goldberg has been called Nat all the way through this. But again, he borrows this kind of a completely different name in order to destabilize the sense of identity. And this is actually something that McCann draws attention to here. But again, my old mum used to shout, quick before it gets cold, and there on the table, what would I see? The nicest piece of gefilte fish you could wish to find on a plate. Gefilte fish is a particular a kosher dish, a Jewish from Jewish culinary tradition, that again is one of the signifiers of his ethnic identity, and shows us a complete performance of selfhood, because this conversation doesn't really originate in anything. It's purely just an opportunity to be nostalgic as a rendition of authentic selfhood. No one has said to him, oh, please tell me about your childhood. Please tell me about the way that you were formed as an individual. It's just emerged out of the conversational necessity to fill the empty space between two characters. And what we see then is performance and a lack of authenticity. And Petey just says, yes, we all remember our childhood in response to this. McCann, I thought your name was Nat. She called me Simon. And Petey, I think, understands that's literally the only thing that can be said about this recollection that Goldberg continually engages in, that actually, in the certainty of this statement, he's exposing the uncertainty indirectly of what has followed, of what has preceded this certain comment. We remember our childhood, but actually we could perform a fake one as well. And Goldberg says, oh, too true. Hey, Mr. Webber, what do you say? Childhood, hot water bottles, hot milk, pancakes, soap suds. What a life. So again, it's just a collection of, I think, unprocessed signs for sort of infantile, womb-like existence, I think, that Stanley seems to be living out on the coast in the boarding house. And I think it's trying to draw that from Stanley in a very early way and trying to invoke that sense of conformity and convention. Again, the pause, the complete inability to articulate a response to this shows that this reflects the state of his present life. It is womb-like, he's kind of trapped in this sort of feeble, Oedipal bubble that prevents him from actually going out into the world and experiencing anything. And that's part of the reason why they're there. Petey's rising for the table. Well, I'll have to be off. So here, I think this is important that Petey leaves, he exits. This is another one of these crucial exits and entrances that we see in the play at the time of sort of Oedipal revelation in the play, and that I think gives rise to this sort of taboo relationship between Stanley and Meg. Petey leaves just at that moment of sort of indirect non-revelation, so to speak, and that taboo relationship, I think, mirrors the taboo relationship that ends up being that's simmering beneath the surface of Blanche and Stanley Kowalski's interactions. A different sort of taboo relationship, but a taboo sort of violation of social norms, nevertheless. A little further down, this conversation about Petey going out for his game of chess, and then Goldberg's being friendly with him. You better go and collect the bottles now. Of course, time's getting on around the corner, remember. Mention my name again. Sense of familiarity that he's invoking in this place. And it gives us this bizarre sense, almost of his kind of omniscience, that he is everywhere and nowhere at the same time, and that he is every man and no one. He can invoke community in this place that he has previously said that he's not from. So that, again, this sheds some light on the inauthenticity of his previous recollections of childhood and his previous claims for sort of authentic Jewish selfhood. Petey and McCann leave, and Stanley moves to the centre. So Stanley's left with Goldberg on his own. And Goldberg again invokes these conversational rituals of hollowness. A warm night, turning, don't mess me about. I beg your pardon, moving downstage. I'm afraid there's been a mistake. We're booked out. Your room is taken. Mrs. Bosworth to tell you, you'll have to find somewhere else. So again, Stanley's degeneration is being suggested further and further here through his movements on the stage. Again, it's what's telling us the authentic state of his mind, but actually his language here is quite directly connected to his authentic feelings here. And Goldberg immediately at the beginning tries to invoke that false sense of politeness that we've seen through the interaction with Stanley and McCann. So there is a kind of false sense of control over the world that he's in, and because it's not his own world to kind of dictate. So the power over Goldberg that he attempts to invoke here is inauthentic, and Goldberg knows this, and that's why immediately when he mentions actually the material source of power, the ownership of the boarding house, Goldberg hones in on it immediately. You'll have to find somewhere else. Are you the manager here? So he pinpoints I think the emptiness of Stanley's rendition, but his performative rendition of power. And he says, that's right. And Goldberg furthers this. Is it a good game? He knows that it's not true. And he's going to probe him to reveal that. I'll run the house. I'm afraid you and your friend will have to find another accommodation. And then Goldberg's physicality is what tells us the truth of his feelings about this. Oh, I forgot. I must congratulate you on your birthday. From his hands, congratulations. So this act of amicability that we see in these lines here shows us that actually this is a sort of a way of diffusing his ability to threaten Stanley. And so his feigned physical friendliness and his empty language is what allows him to try and deflate this sense of tangible, concrete power that Stanley is trying to perform here. And Stanley knows that he ignores his hand. Perhaps you're deaf. Again, his behaviour now is mirroring McCann's previously, and he's, again, trying to insist on the directness of communication, which, of course, he's quite happy to avoid later on in the play at different moments. And so Goldberg says, no, what makes you think that? As a matter of fact, every single one of my senses is at its peak. Not bad for going for a man past 50. But a birthday always feels a great occasion, taken much too granted for these days. What a thing to celebrate birth. And so immediately, this insistence on directness of the material facts of their powerful relationship triggers Goldberg into one of his performative renditions of selfhood and of nostalgia, and allows him to control the interaction through the gentility of his language, through the politeness of his language, and that's where we go. But a birthday is a great occasion, taken too much for granted these days. What a thing to celebrate birth. And the thing is, the supposed miracle that he's invoking here is precisely the thing that he's about to create. The birth of someone is the beginning of the affirmation of an identity, and he is about to engage in the robbing of Stanley's selfhood, like getting up in the morning. Marvelous. Some people don't like the idea of getting up in the morning, and so there's this kind of deliberate turning of the hostility on Stanley here. I've heard them. Getting up in the morning, they say, what is it? Your skin's crabby, you need to shave, your eyes full of muck, your mouth is like a bog ass, the palms of your hands are full of sweat, your nose is clogged up, your feet stink, but what are you but a corpse waiting to be washed? And this is a deliberate description of Stanley. And I think it gives us Goldberg's sort of false purpose in this particular sense of line here, in these particular lines. Whenever I hear that point of view, I feel cheerful, because I know what it is to wake up with the sunshine, the sound of the lawnmower, all the little birds, the smell of the grass, tomato juice. He's asserting his joy in existence, but I think the actual purpose of this is empty. There is no actual articulation of concrete purpose. It's simply just to perform the act of joy, the linguistic act of joy, and we can see it's authentic because he just lists sort of conventional signs of that joy rather than actually explaining their significance to him. So again, this pointed sort of indirect criticism of Stanley, and then the counterpoint. This is the version of life that they want to force him to adopt. That actually you should be grateful for your existence. You should be part of a community. You should be a member of a sort of social orthodoxy. Is where he moves, and Stanley just can't tolerate this. Get out. But at perfect timing, McCann enters with the bottles, which is ironic because it's forced joy. And so what we see here then is that in this particular stage direction, we have the ritual being exposed very nakedly for the kind of sham positivity that it represents. And Stanley knows it's get that drink out. These are unlicensed premises. So he borrows their orthodoxy here, the language of orthodoxy in society and power, unlicensed premises, to ward them away, to ward them off. And Goldberg, again, tries to maintain the friendly humour. You're in a terrible humour today, Mr. Webber, and on your birthday too, with a good lady getting her strength up to give you a party. So he affirms his identity in this, but Stanley is lost for this affirmation. He doesn't really know what to do against this. So it's actually the ritual of the affirmation of identity that provides the trap for Goldberg and McCann. And so we see this sort of the falsity of this ritual of self-affirmation is actually a danger. It's a dangerous then belief to have. And Stanley tries to reveal his understanding of this, of their intentions. Let me make this clear. You don't bother me. To me, you're nothing but a dirty joke. And I think that's masking the truth of this bleak reality that he sees in them. I have the responsibility towards the people in this house, and again masks his own sense of void with a dissembled sense of responsibility towards others. And this again, shows that he, at least on some level, is aware of why they're here. They've been down here too long. They've lost their sense of smell. I haven't, and nobody's going to take advantage of them while I'm here. So here, he's invoking actually the desire to protect others as the reason for his hostility. But of course, this is not true. We see that this is not true because his own concern is for himself and his own safety. We've seen that already in the play. This house isn't your cup of tea. There's nothing here for you from any angle. So why don't you just go without any more fuss? So I think it's not possible here to sort of mask the absurdity of existence. So he's just trying to get rid of them. There's nothing with which to shroud the sense of obscurity. There's nothing here for you from any angle. And that's what he means when he says this. There's nothing here in this existence, in the boarding house, where Stanley is able to sort of confront the emptiness of existence without it bothering him in any way, without him having to take part in the forceful emptiness of social rituals. So there's nothing here for people like McCann and Goldberg that take any angle of orthodoxy. There's nothing here for them, so why don't you go without any fuss? Of course, they ignore him and focus again just on that physical display of power. Sit down. It's no good starting any kind of trouble. Sit down. Just the sheer repetition of this shows the unreliability of language.